And I know this story is slightly older, but I want to get Aaron's thoughts on this. And I want to have a conversation with Aaron because Aaron is pretty close to RFK. Me and JB, we both said I didn't think this motherfucker was going to go independent.
I said he
Now
would.
this should be Bernie Sanders. I'll admit I did not see this shit coming at all, at all. Like if people say, "Well, will you support RFK go independent?" Like, he ain't go independent. Get the fuck out of here. So I will admit I did not see this coming at all. The Democratic Party decided to rig the election again against RFK Jr. And RFK Jr. told the Democratic Party to fuck around and find out. The same thing Bernie Sanders did. So I have criticism of RFK, but I will give him credit where credit is due. This is a fantastic move because I want to see the two-party duopoly destroyed, right? So I'll pass to Aaron first. What's your general first thoughts on this? And then I'll get Andrew as well, so I can get you guys out here on time. Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I also don't like the fact that we're ruled by a corporate duopoly that works to crush any sort of meaningful democracy and reproduce oligarchic global empire election after election, no matter who we vote for. Now, RFK is trying to do something very interesting for a person outside of the two-party system. He's trying to run a campaign and actually win. He's not thinking that he wants a beautiful protest. He's trying to win because I think for a number of reasons he recognizes, hey, how important it is. I mean, his uncle JFK ran for president because he thought the risk of nuclear war was extremely serious and that somebody needed to do something about this. But even as he runs as saying a lot of things that are, for the Cold War. He didn't run saying like I'm Che Guevara or something like that. He ran as a Cold Warrior, and then they eventually murdered him for thinking that he was not doing the right thing for the Cold War. So we need to be aware of this history. Americans are not aware of the history of our own country. One way that this is going to be addressed, I think, that's going to be going on at the same time as this RFK Jr. campaign, there's a film series that I'm working on called I've been brought on here late. I'm just going to be working on the website and the blog, and they might interview me for the film. We'll see, but it's a series of short episodes about an hour long on the four assassinations of the 1960s. RFK, or the Kennedy brothers, so JFK and RFK, and then also Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. They were all killed for basically the same reasons by the same general force in the American regime, this sort of fascist, dark quadrant of the regime that makes it so that the U.S. is always pursuing empire. And when Kennedy went against that, they murdered him. It's the evidence of this is overwhelming, and people will see this when the films come out. But then they also kill Malcolm X, they kill Martin Luther King, and then they kill Robert Kennedy. And this history, people need to understand like how obvious, how much evidence there is for one thing that this happened. Because when they talk about Chinese propaganda or Russian propaganda, we have propaganda that's not even propaganda. It's like we have a whole fake history. And
Yeah.
and like RFK is, because RFK is trying to win, and I have understood that this is what he was trying to do from the beginning. I didn't look at him and think like, do I agree with all of his positions on this or that? Because I'm aware of the fact that if somebody with my politics was going to run for president, they wouldn't have a chance in hell. And so why would I want him to be articulating all of the correct positions? But what I do believe is that he is telling the truth when he says he wants to wind down the empire because he wants to take a stand against the corrupt merger of state and corporate power, which he knows is basically a definition of fascism. And he knows that the fascist apparatus of the state killed his father and killed his uncle. And he, I believe, is going to risk assassination because that's what he's doing. I believe he'd walk over broken glass or burning coals to be able to do this. And it's exactly what the country needs in terms of winding down the empire and restoring some measure of democracy and ending all of this censorship and, going after Assange and all these other crazy authoritarian measures. Like, he is against those things. He is not a socialist. Okay, I'm more of on the socialist side and a critic of capitalism, but there is no socialist political formation that is viable in the U.S. to build a coalition around. And so what is there? What does that leave? Well, democracy is something we say we believe in, and he is someone who's saying, let's follow follow the Bill of Rights. Let's stop being a lawless global empire. Let's stop the coups and overthrow operations and invasions and bombings. Let's try to do what China has done and befriend the world. And also, he, unlike anybody else, including Cornel West, RFK Jr. signed the Truth and Reconciliation Committee pledge. It's, American Truth Now. You can go to that website. It's a statement signed by a number of prominent Americans, including members of the Malcolm X family, Martin Luther King's family, and the Kennedy family, calling for a truth and reconciliation process like they had in South Africa to disclose the truth about the political assassinations of the 60s and to lead a national discussion and process so that we can look at what happened to this country and how we became essentially run by this outlaw imperialist regime. And I believe he absolutely wants to confront them, and he would like to either do it, and he's willing to risk getting killed trying to do it. And to me, this is an actual, we're so, myself included, we're so cynical and jaded about U.S. politics that this is actually an amazing human drama that you couldn't really script. I don't know that he will win, and I can't predict exactly what he would do if he were elected, but I will say that I believe that unlike people like Obama or Bill Clinton that want to like get a bunch of speaking fees and everything else when they leave, and they want to serve the bankers as much as they can, I believe that I understand why RFK is running, because I understand his biography, and I know people around him like David Talbot, my friend and co-host of Devil's Chess Club. He's the one who told Bobby years ago, and he just planted the seed. I don't really think Bobby totally believed him until years later, but he told Bobby, look, I interviewed everybody that was around your father. Your father was going to reinvestigate the JFK assassination, and he told people that, and then they killed him, because Bobby didn't even know that until David told him that. And this is, to me, people, it's cliche when people like Alex Jones say like it's not left right, that's a false paradigm, right? That's usually bullshit. But what I will say about the RFK campaign and the way that he does attract some support from conservative regular Americans, I don't mean like conservative like oligarchs necessarily, but it is because it is a bit about a top-down system that's not even appealing to conservative people. Most people who, even conservatives, it's a tiny minority of conservatives that would really support what we do have, which is a disguised fascist system that wants to rule the world and wants to make sure that the side of the imperial oligarchy always wins, even if that requires murdering elected officials and anybody else. Like, that's the system we have, and nobody is even, the Democrats and the Republicans are pretending that we don't have that system, that we have some other make-believe system that they want to talk about. And that's all bullshit. And RFK is out there saying, I'm going to tell the truth to the American people. And by and large, that is what he's done. Some areas I think he's quite wrong on, and so I don't think what he's saying is like the full-on truth, to put it mildly. But set all that aside, the bigger picture, he's taken on the most powerful, richest, deadliest forces in the world today, and probably in human history, and he's facing off against them. And I think that we should all unite again, around him for this purpose. His position on winding down nuclear confrontations with, potentially nuclear confrontations with China and Russia, that reason alone would be enough to justify voting for him compared to these other two people that we're going to get, probably Trump and Gavin Newsom. But I mean, to me, I'm really happy that he's running. It's a very strange and unusual candidacy that I don't know how it could be recreated anytime soon. If he loses, then I think we are headed for a period of really bad imperial decline, and or some sort of, events that they may pull out of their ass to try to change things. Who knows what will happen as they try to hold on to power. But to me, Kennedy seems like the choice to defeat this thing. And I mean more the empire than the duopoly. The duopoly is a symptom of the empire.
Yeah, I have my reservations, especially regarding the role of electoral politics and making change. But I will say this. I appreciate the revolutionary optimism that I hear from RFK Jr. supporters, and the sense of urgency that we must take on the system. I never had respect for Marianne Williamson and her supporters, because look at Kyle and Crystal right now. Marianne Williamson supporters was always open bias supporters. Like they were having a little pet project. You have Kyle already doing propaganda for Gavin Newsom. So you already know that Marianne Williamson and her supporters were never serious. So I have a lot of reservations about RFK but I appreciate that his supporters in his campaign seem to be serious about shaking things up. And I'm glad he went independent because it showed he was serious about that. Because one thing I would say before was, I don't think you're serious, bro. Like, if you're a Democrat, I don't think you're serious about anything you say. So at least
he's not fucking around, man. He is not like, it's not a vanity candidacy. It's not a protest thing. Like the guy wants to win.
Yeah, and the fact that he went independent kind of shows that, because I didn't think he was serious. I don't think anyone would run a Democrat in the current state of affairs is serious. The one thing I want to show you, I saw this Fox segment where it was talking about RFK running independent, and they put this graph up, and this shit infuriates me. This is among independents, right? So I've been saying this for quite some time. If you're an independent and you vote for Republican or Democrat, you're not independent.
Yeah.
Stop cosplaying and register as a party that you fucking vote for. Because I don't set people who call themselves independent if they're not voting third party. Even if they vote for a third party, I don't agree with like a libertarian party. If you're independent, be fucking independent and vote third party. This shit right here is unacceptable. Where 52% of quote unquote independents support Trump, 39% vote Biden. What are you, just too embarrassed to call yourself a Republican or Democrat? Anyway, this shit annoys me. But I hope that Dr. Cornel West and RFK can change this. I will give you guys last thoughts. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me for 90 minutes tonight. So, Andrew, your last thoughts on this story in general, or anything else you want to say? This has been a long, interesting conversation. I'll pass to Aaron for last thoughts, then we wrap up.
Yeah, I would just say, I just want to repeat again, like, my decision on if I will vote for either RFK Jr. or Cornel West, again, is going to be more about how they use their campaign resources. I definitely agree with a lot of what you've been saying, Aaron. The last thing I would say, not to like go too far back into that conversation, is my point about his statements about the border is his proposed solution, or at least roadmap to solution, involves giving a lot more funding to the Department of Homeland Security. That's regardless of how I would structure border policy. I would not do it with the Department of Homeland Security, because as we've seen from the Twitter files and the fact that they run slave labor in their, migrant detention centers, they are very much a part of the national security state apparatus. And so I would be very hesitant about advocating for supporting that. But yeah, overall, I definitely agree with what Nick was saying about independence. And that's why I said that, independents are likely going to vote for a Democrat or Republican. So I agree. I lump them into that same boat. And then again, if I consider you could pull 20%, maybe, I don't know if that's a little too generous or right on the money, no matter how good of a candidate you are in the first election, where you actually break 170 to 200-year-old duopoly. You're probably going to have to do that with non-voters. So that's just my final thoughts. Again, I'm happy that RFK Jr. and Cornel West are running regardless of my major criticisms, because they have resources and name recognition that do a lot to weaken the duopoly.
Yeah, I said it many times, despite my criticism, I love the fact that Dr. Cornel West is running, because he's going to serve as a very important tool to pull Black people out of the two-party duopoly. And that's something I care deeply about. But I got to maintain my criticisms and face that. You guys know there's no secret. Like Aaron Good said earlier, I like Dr. West. Dr. West followed me a long time ago. My first ever Substack article I wrote was an op-ed comparing Black neoliberalism to Malcolm X style socialism. And Dr. Cornel West set me up and said he enjoyed the article. We've been friends ever since. But as someone with a platform, as someone who has some sort of responsibility, I can't allow my feelings towards friendship with Dr. Cornel West to get in the way of my analysis. And I try my best not to allow that conflict of interest to affect my analysis and what I believe the best step for the left to do. So I'm more in a position where Andrew's at, and I said this literally even before Dr. Cornel was announced, way before. I said I think we need to stop declaring our support for people. I like it, and I'm gonna be one of the people that may vote for you, may not. Are you gonna keep working for it or not? Am I gonna vote for Dr. Cornel West? Maybe, good chance. Probably not though. Are you gonna win the vote? I think that should be the position of the working class, no matter what. That's just my opinion. Aaron, I give you last thoughts, then we gotta get out here. Anything you want to plug? Feel free to plug your podcast, books, or anything, and any general last thoughts, and then we gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I run the American Exception podcast on Patreon, which includes the Devil's Chess Club show with David Talbot and Bryce Green. We're on YouTube there as well. And I'm working on that Four Died Trying film, which is going to premiere on Apple TV and then other outlets as well on November 22nd, which is the 60th anniversary of the JFK assassination. And it goes deep into the stories of why they killed the Kennedy brothers, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. So people should watch that. If you know the stories already, they do a great job. It's a great production. They've interviewed a lot of amazing people. They worked on it for 7 years. It's kind of fateful that it comes out now. And people should check that out. I want to say that, Andrew, I also feel like the border issue is worrisome in a sense because, yeah, you're talking about the agencies that are going to deal with that are not agencies that we would think good things about as people who are politically on the left. So Homeland Security seems always like a strange German sort of fatherland thing. It's a weird thing that they created it in the first place after we had our own little Reichstag fire on 9/11.
I heard an argument that it's not even constitutional, but I can't make that argument. But it's not even constitutional. I heard someone way smarter than me that's a lawyer on the left that make that argument. I need to read it so I can like replicate that argument. It was very well done. Like, bro, a lot of these agencies not even constitutional. Like, our government's been off the road. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that doesn't matter because the U.S. Constitution has the supremacy clause, which says ratified treaties are the highest law in the land. The UN Charter is a ratified treaty, and it outlaws aggression. And U.S. leaders break that law all the time, so they break the Constitution. It doesn't really matter. This is a lawless regime, essentially. The other thing that I want to say about this election and comparing it, whatever we could say about American democracy, we know it's never really been a full-on categorical democracy, but there are democratic forces in the United States that have been brought to bear at certain points in history. In 1860, you had, after slavery was the most powerful political formation in the United States, finally in 1860, over the issue of not even slavery, but the expansion of slavery, you had a Republican Party and the rest of the establishment split. It's like a four-way race. And Abe Lincoln was able to win. And his coalition included abolitionists and racist free soilers and nativists and former Whig people, part of the old Whig Party, right? And the abolitionists, even though Abe Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist, and abolition of slavery was the correct position, obviously, we can say. The vast majority of Americans now even believe that. But the abolitionists still were like, well, we'll back an anti-abolitionist or someone who's not an abolitionist because it's tactical. By being totally opposed to the expansion of slavery, Abe Lincoln set in motion the end of slavery because his election and the fact that slavery wasn't going to expand, it freaked out the planters, the slavers of the South so much that they realized that in a matter of years, the balance in the Congress would change and they could no longer have the laws they would need and get them through the Senate that would protect the institution of slavery. So they seceded right away. And this is how it changed. It wasn't that there was some Christ-like figure that emerged and just totally told the full-on truth about everything and was completely righteous. It was somebody who was the right person at the right time that could form a coalition around him. And I think that is the position that we should look at today. In 1968, something similar almost happened in the U.S. with the empire. And you had, in 1967, Robert Kennedy Sr. tells Martin Luther King, hey, you should take a multiracial group and bring them to the Capitol and stay there and demand that they stop spending money on the Vietnam War and start spending money on social programs. And MLK said, okay, and he led the Poor People's March. And King's family believes that that's actually why they murdered him. But think about the fact that RFK Sr. was the one who told him to do that. Additionally, they were also going to bring in the Black Panthers. Like, they were inviting them. This wasn't just another version of the liberal 1963 March on Washington. This was like the Robert Kennedy, the more radical Martin Luther King, and the even more radical Black Panthers. And they were all going to say, end this war and start doing things to help poor people. And that's where the country was at in 1968, and democracy likely would have prevailed, and you would have had a change in the trajectory of U.S. policy. But they just murdered everyone. They murdered Martin Luther King in April, and then 2 months later they murder Robert Kennedy right after he wins the California primary. And we know what happened since. You get Nixon, Watergate, Reagan Revolution in America goes way far to the right. When it really, in 1968, they were on the verge of going further to the left than they ever have. And so the fascist apparatus of the regime just murdered everyone. This is a history we got to deal with, and we got to learn from it. And there's no better time like now, because these issues are coming to a head. And unlike 1968, the U.S. does not have this hidden reserve of power around the world that it has acquired through covert operations and everything else. Like, actually, diplomatically and economically, the U.S. is in a much weaker position. I think the empire is basically dead in the water at this point, and it just needs to be somehow put out of its misery without leading to nuclear Armageddon. And I think that the RFK campaign is probably the most viable way to have any hope of achieving that.